What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're enjoying your Monday afternoon so far. This is NYG Jeffy T85 here, and I'm just going to bring some news, notes, and a little bit of nuggets from the press conference done this afternoon by Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, the general manager Joe Schoen and the head coach Brian Daboll of the New York Giants, as they went to have their season-ending press conference for the team this afternoon, just to talk about what their, the season overall, just to talk about, their expectations going into the offseason, when they're going to start the process, who they're talking to, specific players that they'd like to have back, players they're going to monitor, and then possible decisions going forward, and about narrowing the talent gap in the NFC East. Now, first, we'll start out with just, how the team felt about the end of the season. They pretty much were still going through the motions that you expect when you're a general manager, a head coach, part of the organization after you lose a tough game and your offseason is just about to begin, your season ends. Of course, even after a couple of days, us Giants fans are still feeling it, some of us at least. Not as maybe as bad as it was on Saturday night, but we're still feeling the effects of being eliminated from the playoffs. But at the same time, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll understand what happened after the fact that the season is now over. Now they have to go concentrate on the offseason, and they have to start looking and evaluating this roster overall, as well as potential coaching replacements if the offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka, or the defensive coordinator, Wink Martindale, happen to get hired for a head coaching job. Just some of the quotes that came from Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen in regards to the Giants overall. Now first, obviously, we're going to start with the quarterback, Daniel Jones. And it sounds like just everything that we hear from that press conference, it sounds like this team will do whatever they can to try to bring back Daniel Jones. It's just all going to make sure it has to work out with the type of numbers that they're going to be working with going forward. Before I start anything, the Giants right now currently have $3.6 million in dead cap money that will probably increase when eventually they try to work on a release and cut Kenny Golladay, and his dead cap is going to rise the Giants' dead cap maybe up to like 14, 15 million or so. So we're going to have to wait and see how that's all going to be put together. Also, how much money the NFL is going to get from the TV revenue deals, how much it's going to increase the NFL money the Giants are going to get in the offseason. But just for coming from Joe Schoen. Joe Schoen says they'd like to have Daniel back here and adds that there is a business side to it, but stresses they'd like Daniel Jones back, which is the obvious thing you're going to hear from the general manager in regards to Daniel Jones and the fact that they want him back here immediately because of the fact of how important he is to this team. So that's not really a shock at all, and it pretty much says, we're pleased with how he played this season. Not surprised. Daniel Jones, you look at the numbers, they're not going to be eye-popping or anything. When you look at the touchdowns numbers, he did lower his turnover numbers. Remember, this is a guy that turned the football over a lot in his first couple of years. And Daniel Jones only had 5 interceptions in the regular season. He did throw one on Saturday against the Eagles, so 6 if you want to count that. But either way, Daniel Jones cut down his interceptions. So it sounds like that the team will be wanting to bring back Daniel Jones any way they can. It's just dependent on how the money aspect comes together, how they're going to be able to negotiate a contract, how much he's going to be worth, etc., evaluating when it comes to the market. But overall, they want to try to bring Daniel Jones back. Obviously, Joe Schoen talked about the foundation has been set in the organization, which is obvious because of how this team played and they came together, and there's tremendous energy in the building overall. That is evident because of how well this team came together overall during the season. This team really seemed like they had a strong bond within that locker room with all the veterans they had on the team, with the young guys that came in, free agents they brought in during the season, draft picks, veterans, key players that have been here for a while. So that's another thing you got to think about when it comes to the New York Giants. Now, also some other things. Brian Daboll says there's no guarantees from year to year. Just because you win one year does not mean it's going to happen the next, which you're absolutely right. Just because we are a team that's looking like we're going to be on the rise does not guarantee we are going to be a playoff team next year. We all want to. We all think we will. But at the same time, is it a guarantee it will happen? Absolutely not. We got to see what's going to happen with the New York Giants in terms of injuries and everything else. And Joe Schoen said in his press conference that they're going to be holding meetings on Thursday to begin some offseason planning, which means they're going to start evaluating the roster, start looking at some players that are going to be free agents in the offseason, start maybe looking at some draft prospects early on, some players that are coming out from college football, and see, where they're going to evaluate them, where they might be coming out in terms of the NFL draft before the combine actually, and individual workouts, but still get an early planning period on it. Now, in terms of Saquon Barkley, this is where it gets a little interesting. Asked about Saquon Barkley, Joe Schoen first mentions the business side of the NFL, says he would like to have, excuse me, says he would like to have Barkley, says he'd like to have him back. But reference cap, we would like to have Saquon back if it works out. Now, as we know, the Giants have a lot of decisions to make on this roster, including Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. The franchise tag numbers for a running back are around 10, 12 million. Are the Giants going to be willing to commit a $10 to $12 million salary cap hit for a one-year deal on the franchise tag? And how is Saquon Barkley going to take that? That's the question. And that is the risk that they ran when they did not give Daniel Jones that fifth-year option. So we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. But either way, Joe, it sounds like that they want to keep Saquon Barkley, but it's all going to be dependent on how the contract and the numbers work out. That's going to be the biggest issue when it comes to Saquon Barkley. Is how are the numbers going to work together? Joe Schoen also jokingly said that he likes Leonard Williams, and he'd like to consider. And what Leonard Williams did say, he would consider taking a pay cut because he wants to be able to play next to Dexter Lawrence next year. Leonard Williams is going to have a $32 million cap hit next year. He's going to be going into his age 29 season. He did have a lot of injuries this year. He did not have a good season. I believe he only had about 3 sacks this year. He played about 11 games this season. Dude missed a bunch of games due to injuries. Neck injury. He had a shoulder injury. He had, obviously, a MCL injury during the beginning of the season. Leonard Williams is a guy that the Giants could possibly look to move on from, but I'm curious to see how much of a pay cut that Leonard Williams would take to stay on the roster. He's still a valuable player on this defense, but I would not be surprised if Joe Schoen, which they need to, this team needs to bring in defensive tackle depth going forward. So that's one thing that they definitely need to do, is bring in some more defensive depth on this team going forward. And obviously Joe Schoen also said, we're trying to build this thing so we can sustain it, and there's risk reward with every big contract. Joe Schoen pretty much said in his press conference today, his first goal in this offseason, which he said in his first press conference when he was hired as New York Giants general manager last year at this time, he wanted to try to look to keep players in-house that deserve to be here, and then he was going to supplement other players through free agency, which means the same thing he's gone through in his press conference today. He wants to try to lock in the homegrown players and then supplement others through the draft and through free agency. And that's going to point to some homegrown players that are either key free agents this offseason or guys that are looking to be locked up long term. Obviously, you look at Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Julian Love, maybe Darius Slayton. You got guys like Dexter Lawrence, Xavier McKinney, Andrew Thomas, other players like Sterling Shepard, Isaiah Hodgins. You got Jihad Ward. You got players on this team that are going to be commanding big time money on this team. And you got to try to find a way to make it work with this team going forward. That's the problem. You got to try to make things work with this team going forward. That's the hard part. Because you have to evaluate the salary cap, and you got to do what's best for your long-term cap ramifications with the team going forward. I apologize, I have a cold right now, so either way. Obviously, he talked about some of the other things. They talked about that they had conversations with Julian Love after the season, and they would like to bring Julian Love back on a contract, but only if it fits. They also talked about how they sort of deflected away about maybe having a conversation with Odell Beckham Jr. in the offseason if they want to bring him back. They talked about the talent gap and that they need to close. This is one of the most intriguing things to me. The talent gap there we need to close in the NFC East, and points out they were 1-5-1 in the division. What did every single New York Giants fan and player and team say? We needed to bring and cut the gap in the division. We went 1-5-1. We lost to Dallas twice. We lost to Philly twice. Actually, make it Philly 3 times if you include the postseason. We tied with Washington, and we beat Washington. That is a big reason why we were not in a better position than we were right now. What is the best way you could take a leap in your conference and in your division? You beat your divisional opponents. We need to do a much better job next year in the division. We went 1-5-1. That's not getting it done. The Giants are going to have to find ways next season to beat the Eagles and beat the Cowboys. Joe Schoen also talked about that they had a plan right now in place just in case defensive coordinator Wink Martindale or offensive coordinator Mike Kafka get a head coaching job. I believe Mike Kafka has had 3 interviews on the table, one with the Texans, one with the Colts, and one with the Panthers, and I believe Martindale also had an interview with the Colts for head coaching jobs going forward. So just in case, and the Giants do have a very strong coaching staff. God forbid, and I don't expect it, and a lot of Giants fans don't expect it, just in case Mike Kafka or Wink Martindale do in fact get hired as a head coach of a team next year. The Giants do have confidence, which they should, in their coaching staff to be able to supplement one of those guys, or if God forbid both, in case they do get hired for a coaching position going forward. The team also said, in terms of Dexter Lawrence, another key player who had a fantastic season with the New York Giants, that they are going to try to evaluate when it comes to Dexter Lawrence. You know, that he did a phenomenal job with the season he had this year, and they're going to try and talk about what to do on his 5th-year option, which is the right thing to do because Dexter Lawrence was unbelievable this year. He was definitely the most impactful guy on the defensive line for the Giants this year all throughout. He played every single game this year. He has never really missed any games at all. He had the most sacks. He had the most pressures up the middle. He had a breakout season. He's a second-team All-Pro player, a first-time Pro Bowler. In my opinion, Dexter Lawrence should be one of the priorities this offseason to sign to a long-term extension. How many years in a row, Giants fans, have we had defensive tackles that have been stud players that we have let go? From Linval Joseph to Damon Snacks Harrison, Jonathan Hankins, Dalvin Tomlinson. We've always had very good defensive tackles that we have never kept around this team, and we've let them go in the offseason because we've done a good job supplementing them in the NFL draft. We need to find a way to keep our guys on our roster going forward. That's going to be a key for this Giants team, is keeping Dexter Lawrence in the long term going forward. And I do believe they're going to find a way to keep Love going forward. A couple of other players I'm going to talk about real quickly before I give my final thoughts on everything. Joe Schoen specifically said, it was a lot of Joe Schoen talking in this press conference, by the way. Brian Daboll said a couple of things about the team here and there, but it's really mostly Joe Schoen that did a lot of the talking in this press conference. Obviously now, because Brian Daboll, obviously with the coaching of the aspect of the team, he's obviously talking about evaluating the roster, etc. But really, Joe Schoen's job now starts in terms of the offseason. Joe Schoen pretty much talked about his opinion on Xavier McKinney after the ATV accident that happened during the bye week, that Joe Schoen pretty much said that his opinion on Xavier McKinney did not change, and that he says everybody makes a mistake, and that he still believes he's a great kid and he's still a key piece to this team going forward, which I'm happy to hear. And McKinney, just like Julian Love, are are captains on this team. They are leaders on this New York Giants organization, and they are guys that could be foundational pieces, part of this team going forward. So that's a nice thing to hear. And then just to finish it out, on our old buddy Sterling Shepard. Shane did say that Sterling Shepard is one of his favorite players on this team, which does not come as a surprise because of both Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen did say Sterling Shepard's importance to his team and his role was incredibly valuable even after the ACL injury that he had. And at the same time, Sterling Shepard's door on returning to the New York Giants is not closed completely. They will monitor his injury coming off the ACL all the way back in week 3 when he tore his ACL at the end of the Cowboys game at MetLifeStadium. They do not close the door, but it's not a guarantee that he will be back, the longest tenured Giant on the team. So, just to close things out, in my opinion, it's not even a question about is Daniel Jones going to be back. It's really just about, are you going to be able to work out a contract with Daniel Jones before you get to the March 7th franchise tag deadline? Remember, the free agency starts on March 15th. The deadline for tagging a player is March 7th. The Giants have 2 major key players right now. And this is going to have a lot to do with what's going to happen with Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones. We're all assuming that Daniel Jones is going to work out a contract extension and Saquon Barkley is going to get franchise tagged to get both these guys back on this team. Remember, Daniel Jones, he did not have a good game against Philadelphia. But you also have to go by what's going to happen on the free agent market. And Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are smart. Coming from a non-Giants biased opinion, they are both smart to evaluate the market and see what their true value is going to be when they get to the free agent market. So I wonder if Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are going to be a little steadfast to take any type of hometown discount, no matter how much they like the New York Giants. Are they going to be a little weary, depending on a hometown discount, to come back with New York? But the thing is, the Giants, if they want to keep both these guys immediately, they have got to find a way to re-sign one of these guys before March 7th. It's imperative. If you re-sign one of these guys, if you get Daniel Jones' contract done before March 7th, then you could worry about either franchise tagging Saquon Barkley or you could let Saquon Barkley, you can try to negotiate a long-term deal. That's how you figure that out. Because if you can't get a deal done with either one of these guys, then you have a really difficult decisions to make. Because then you got to figure, do we have to throw the franchise tag on Daniel Jones, God forbid, and work out a long-term deal on Saquon Barkley? Do we let Saquon Barkley go? Do we let Daniel Jones go? March 7th is the most important date for the New York Giants. It's not March 15th. It's March 7th. The franchise tag deadline, because that's when the Giants are going to have to find a way to negotiate a long-term deal with Jones or Barkley, or both, before they have to worry about the franchise tag. Just what I evaluate. Before I close this out. The Giants obviously know. Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, and the team knows. There is a big-time talent gap between them and the Eagles and Cowboys. They have to try to close that gap by getting in better players. They're obviously very, very big on culture on this team. Homegrown talent they would like to keep. They would like to try to keep their homegrown guys and then supplement other players through the draft and free agency. They want to keep Daniel Jones. They want to keep Saquon Barkley. It sounds like they want to keep Julian Love. They are interested in bringing back Sterling Shepard. It sounds like that they're interested in keeping Xavier. They want to keep Xavier McKinney long term. Sounds like they want to work out a deal with Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, Andrew Thomas will become more of a priority next offseason or maybe in season 2023. The Giants right now are a team that they are going to have a lot of tough decisions to make. And Joe Schoen made that reference during his press conference that there's going to be a lot of difficult decisions, and it's all going to be dependent on how things are worked out around the cap. But at the same time, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll know what the hell they're doing. And what gives you a more confidence than knowing what this GM and the head coach are doing. I am completely fine with whatever this team does. Going forward. Whatever they do. I'm fine with every personnel decision they do. Some players do leave, I'll be hurt as a fan. Like, if Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, and Sterling Shepard don't come back, I will be hurt. Gotta be honest. Sterling Shepard is my favorite player on the team. It would kill me. It would really hurt not to see him on the team next year. It would. But I would not, be not bat an eye if they do decide that they have to move on. Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, same thing, though they are more precedent because these guys are bigger keys to this team going forward. Same thing with Julian Love. Dexter Lawrence, I do believe, will be here. Xavier McKinney, I think they'll work something out. Either way, I'm proud of this New York Giants team. And also, just quickly, Joe Schoen, whatever he says right now in his press conferences, he could do the exact other thing because this guy is going to give you something. He's going to say one thing. He's going to go around and do something else. So just be on the lookout when it comes to Joe Schoen. Either way, just giving you a couple of news notes and nuggets. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think of what Joe Schoen said in his press conference for the New York Giants and Brian Daboll as well, as the team went over the 2022 season, and now they look forward to what they're going to be planning to put together in the 2023 offseason. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's go, New York Football Giants. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about these comments from Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll in their season-ending press conference for the New York Giants. As always, close it out with a big Together Blue, everyone.